Noticing changes in his son's behavior around his new girlfriend, a father hides under the bed to see what she was doing to him. Joshua had always been a dedicated father and proud of his relationship with Andrew. From the early years of his son's life, he made a point to be present at every important moment. Andrew, in turn, was a cheerful and communicative boy who loved talking to his dad and sharing his ideas and dreams. When Joshua's marriage ended, he worked hard to shield his son from the impacts of the separation, believing that their bond would be enough to cushion the changes in their family dynamic. In the first few months, Andrew seemed to cope well with the situation, although Joshua noticed small signs of introspection that had not been part of the boy's behavior before. It was during this period of restructuring that Rebecca entered Joshua's life. She was a charismatic and understanding woman who quickly won his sympathy. Joshua decided to introduce her to Andrew gradually, and at first everything seemed to go well. The boy reacted naturally and with a bit of curiosity, greeting Rebecca politely and appearing comfortable in her presence. During their initial meetings, Andrew maintained a neutral attitude, not enthusiastic, but neither uncomfortable. Joshua believed that over time, the relationship between the two would grow stronger, but gradually, something began to change. What had initially been normal indifference started to feel like mild distancing, which eventually turned into subtle but consistent rejection. Andrew began to avoid Rebecca more noticeably, preferring to leave the room whenever she was around. Even so, Joshua thought the situation was temporary, until he realized his son's discomfort was growing daily, creating a rift between them. It was then that Joshua began to suspect there was something deeper behind his son's behavior. One evening, seemingly ordinary, Joshua started to notice Andrew's growing discomfort during dinner. They were sitting at the table, and Joshua was trying to keep the conversation light. "Andrew, how was your day at school? Anything interesting?" he asked while serving himself another piece of meat. The boy looked at his plate and replied in a muted tone, "It was normal, Dad." Joshua felt the response was too short, less than he had hoped for. He tried a different approach. "What about soccer? Did you guys play during gym class today? You always enjoy that." Andrew shrugged. "We didn't play soccer today." Rebecca, who had been silent until then, tried to engage. "Maybe he's just tired. That's normal after a long day, right, Andrew?" She smiled, trying to show empathy, but Andrew didn't respond. He merely pushed his plate aside, murmuring, "I'm tired, Dad. Can I go to bed?" Joshua looked at the nearly full plate and frowned. "Are you done? You barely ate anything." Andrew shook his head. "I'm not hungry." Joshua hesitated but eventually nodded. "All right, you can go rest." The boy quickly got up, avoiding Rebecca's gaze, and went to his room, softly closing the door behind him. As they finished dinner, Joshua sat in silence for a few moments, lost in thought. Rebecca, trying to lighten the mood, commented, "He really seems exhausted. Maybe it would be a good idea to talk to his teachers and see if they're not overloading him with homework." Joshua looked at her, trying to decipher something in her words, but everything seemed normal. "Maybe," he replied, though something in the back of his mind was already sounding an alarm. He finished eating and started clearing the table. "I'll wash the dishes. Thanks for helping with dinner tonight," he said, trying to mask his unease. Rebecca stood as well, grabbing her purse. "I'm going to head out, love. It's been a long day for me too, but I'll stop by Andrew's room to say goodnight. I don't want to leave without saying goodbye to him." She approached, kissed Joshua on the cheek and walked toward the boy's room. While washing the dishes, Joshua felt the discomfort that had been building up in recent days. Why did Andrew seem so withdrawn around Rebecca? He was a cheerful and communicative boy, but as soon as she was near, he completely shut down. Shortly after, Rebecca returned to the living room, grabbing her keys. "All set. I said goodbye to him. He was almost asleep," she said, smiling. Joshua forced a smile back. "Drive safely," he replied as he finished the dishes. When Rebecca left, Joshua dried his hands and decided he needed to talk to his son. Something was wrong, and he needed to understand what was happening. He went to Andrew's room, knocked softly on the door, and entered. Andrew was lying down, facing the wall. "Son, are you awake?" Joshua asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. Andrew slowly turned, his eyes half closed. "I am, Dad." Joshua ran his hand through the boy's hair, trying to bridge the gap he felt. "I want to talk to you about something. Are you okay? You've been so quiet lately." Andrew shrugged, saying nothing. Joshua continued, "What about Rebecca? Do you like her? Because it seems like you're uncomfortable when she's here." Andrew looked at his dad, visibly uneasy about the topic. "She's nice, Dad. I don't know. I don't have anything against her." Joshua leaned in a bit more. "Are you sure? You can tell me anything, son. I want you to know that." Andrew avoided his gaze. "I'm just tired, Dad. That's all." Joshua sighed. "All right, we'll talk another day then. Good night." He kissed the boy's forehead and left the room, but the unease lingered. In the following days, Joshua started paying close attention to every detail of Andrew's behavior. When they were alone, the boy seemed to be his usual self, playful, talkative, and full of energy. He laughed loudly while recounting school stories, asked his dad to play games together, and even resumed sharing his dreams and ideas as he had done before. It was as if Rebecca's presence didn't exist during these times. However, as soon as Rebecca appeared in the house, Andrew's transformation was immediate. He became quiet, avoided eye contact with her, and seemed to shrink in her presence. Joshua noticed that this wasn't just a coincidence, and he increasingly felt that something was wrong. As he reflected on the situation, Joshua began to question what Rebecca could have done to cause this reaction in his son. He thought about all the interactions between the two and realized he had never witnessed anything alarming. They rarely spent time alone together. Rebecca was attentive in front of him, asking polite questions and even trying to include Andrew in conversations, but the boy always seemed to dodge them. There wasn't a specific moment Joshua could pinpoint as odd or troubling. Yet his instincts told him the answer lay somewhere, and he needed to look closer. Then Joshua remembered the nights when Rebecca would go to Andrew's room to say goodnight. Every time she spent the night at the house, she made a point of going to the boy's room alone. She always said she wanted to say goodnight and bid him farewell lovingly before leaving. Early in their relationship, however, things had been different. Joshua recalled how Rebecca, with a gentle smile, used to say, "Could you come with me? I don't want Andrew to feel uncomfortable with my presence in his room." He had always found this thoughtfulness admirable and made it a point to accompany her. During those moments, Rebecca would say goodnight to Andrew with kindness. She'd give a smile and quickly leave without pushing anything. Everything seemed perfectly normal. Over time, however, Rebecca stopped asking Joshua to accompany her. He never questioned this change. Maybe she's built a more comfortable relationship with him, he thought. After all, it made sense. Rebecca was a pleasant person, and he believed Andrew would start seeing her as part of the routine. However, in light of his son's recent behavior, Joshua began to rethink this. Why had Rebecca stopped asking for his presence? And why did Andrew seem increasingly uncomfortable with each goodbye? Joshua began to connect the dots. He realized these visits to the room were the only moments Rebecca was alone with Andrew. They were always brief, but they happened every time she stayed overnight. He remembered how, after these goodbyes, Andrew seemed more withdrawn, even in the days that followed. It was as if something heavy occurred there, behind the closed door, something Andrew didn't know or couldn't share. Joshua felt a tightening in his chest as he admitted this to himself. If something was happening, It was during those specific moments, in the room, when he wasn't present. He began to suspect that Rebecca somehow used those few minutes of privacy to do something that made Andrew uncomfortable or even intimidated him. The idea deeply disturbed him, but it made sense. There wasn't another moment when she had the opportunity to be alone with the boy. With these doubts gnawing at his mind, Joshua knew he couldn't keep ignoring the signs. He needed to find out what was happening during those visits. But how? He thought about confronting Rebecca, but knew that without evidence it would be easy for her to deflect or deny. More importantly, he feared it would put Andrew in an even more vulnerable position. He also considered talking directly to his son, but Andrew's evasive responses made it clear the boy was too scared to open up. In the end, Joshua decided the only way to uncover the truth was to observe for himself what happened. He began to think of a way to listen to or see what occurred inside the room without Rebecca knowing. It wouldn't be easy, but Joshua was determined. He would do whatever it took to protect Andrew and understand the growing discomfort. A plan started to take shape in his mind, and he knew he would need to act calmly and precisely to avoid raising suspicion. It was a difficult decision, but he had no choice. It was a night Joshua knew wouldn't be ordinary. He had made up his mind and was determined to put his plan into action. Sitting at the table, the three of them were having dinner, and Joshua attentively observed Andrew's every move. The boy was visibly uncomfortable, fiddling with his food without much appetite. Joshua tried to mask his concern and spoke in a calm tone. "Son, is the food okay? You've barely eaten anything." Andrew glanced at his dad and muttered, "Yeah, Dad, it's good." Rebecca chimed in with a smile, trying to ease the atmosphere. "Maybe he's just tired. Kids have those days, right, Andrew?" Andrew didn't respond, merely lowering his gaze, and Joshua noticed his hand trembling slightly as he held the fork. After dinner, Joshua started washing the dishes, with Rebecca helping beside him. He tried to keep the conversation casual, but his mind was already focused on the plan. "You've been a great help, you know that?" "Thanks," he said, handing her a plate to dry. Rebecca smiled. "I like helping. It's nice to feel like I'm part of things here." Joshua gave a brief smile, but inside, he was thinking about everything he had observed in recent weeks. With the kitchen tidied, Joshua went upstairs to Andrew's room, where the boy was lying down, seemingly waiting for his dad. "Son, it's time for a shower. Grab your things and get ready for bed, okay?" Joshua said, trying to sound natural. Andrew hesitated for a moment, but eventually agreed. "Okay, Dad," he replied, getting up to gather his clothes and head to the bathroom. As soon as he heard the shower running, Joshua went downstairs and approached Rebecca, who was sitting on the couch looking at her phone. He made an effort to appear rushed, but calm. "I just remembered something important from work. I need to step out quickly to take care of it. I won't be long," he said, grabbing his keys. Rebecca looked up and nodded. "All right, love. I'll wait until Andrew goes to bed and then head home. Don't worry." Joshua opened the door, making the usual sound of leaving, but closed it slowly without actually going outside. He seized the moment and quickly ran back upstairs, quietly slipping into Andrew's room. Without hesitation, he lay down under the bed, his heart racing, waiting to discover what was happening there. A few minutes later, Andrew returned to the room, wearing his pajamas. He sat on the bed, letting out a heavy sigh, as if carrying an invisible burden. Joshua, hidden, held his breath, his heart pounding so loudly he thought it might be heard. Then the door to the room slowly opened, and he heard the sound of footsteps entering. Rebecca's voice sounded, but it was different, cold, almost authoritarian. "Andrew," she said, closing the door behind her, "your dad left to deal with work stuff. That means we have more time to talk without interruptions." Andrew swallowed hard, and his voice came out trembling. "I already did what you asked." Please don't ask me to do anything else. Joshua, listening from under the bed, felt a wave of confusion and tension. Do what? He thought, trying to process what was happening. Rebecca sighed, impatient. You're making it too obvious, Andrew. Your dad has already started noticing you act differently when I'm here. If you keep this up, he'll get suspicious. And what do you think will happen if he finds out you stole those things? Andrew raised his voice, panicking. I didn't want to do it. You made me. And if he finds out, he'll know it was me. Rebecca approached the bed, and Joshua held his breath. Do you think he'll believe you? He'll think you're just an ungrateful kid. And more than that, if you open your mouth, I'll leave. And you know what that means, don't you? He'll be alone, just like he was when your mom left. Is that what you want? Do you want your dad to suffer even more because of you? Andrew began to cry softly. I don't want him to suffer, but I can't take this anymore. The boy's voice was broken. Joshua felt a mix of anger and pain hearing those words. He wanted to come out and confront Rebecca right then and there, but he knew he needed to hear everything to fully understand what was happening. You just need to keep doing what I tell you, Rebecca continued. Take something small next time, something he won't notice right away. If you keep acting like nothing's happening, everything will be fine, Andrew sobbed. But he'll notice. He always notices things. Rebecca interrupted him. Then start hiding it better. Don't make me be harder on you, Andrew. After a few seconds of silence, Rebecca changed her tone, now more casual. I'm leaving now. When your dad gets back, tell him I already left. And remember, don't mess this up. Andrew nodded, too scared to look at her. Rebecca left the room, closing the door behind her. Joshua waited a few minutes before coming out from under the bed. When he got up, Andrew was still sitting there, his face buried in his hands. Son, Joshua said, his voice heavy with emotion. Andrew jumped, surprised. Dad, what are you doing here? Joshua sat on the bed, looking directly at his son. I heard everything, Andrew. Joshua took a deep breath, trying to control the mix of anger and sadness that overwhelmed him. He knelt in front of Andrew, looking into his son's eyes with firmness and tenderness. I want you to tell me the truth now, Andrew, he said, his voice full of emotion. What's going on? Why was Rebecca threatening you? Andrew hesitated, his face still wet with tears. He averted his gaze, shrinking as if he wanted to disappear. Dad, I don't know what to say, he murmured, his voice trembling. Joshua gently but firmly placed his hands on the boy's shoulders. Andrew, look at me. I'm here. I want to help you, but I need to know what's going on. The boy swallowed hard, trying to find the words. Finally, with a sob, he began to speak. She makes me take things from the house, Dad, things that are worth money, and I didn't want to do it, but she said that if I didn't, you'd be alone, like when Mom left. Joshua felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. She makes you steal? My God, Andrew. What exactly does she ask you to take? When did this start? Andrew shook his head, tears streaming down again. It started a few weeks ago, Dad. First, she asked for something small, a watch you barely used. She said she needed money to solve a problem. She said it was just that one time, that no one would notice. Joshua was silent for a moment, processing those words. And after that? He asked, his voice low but full of determination. Andrew hesitated, but continued. Then she asked for other things, Mom's necklace that was stored away, then the camera you used for trips. She said if I didn't take them, you'd be mad at me because she'd leave, and it would be my fault. And I was scared, Dad. Joshua frowned, trying to control the growing anger. She told you it would be your fault, that I'd be mad at you. Andrew quickly nodded, his eyes wide with fear. Yes. She said if you found out, you'd never trust me again, that you'd think I was a bad son. And she... She threatened to send me away too, Dad. Said she could convince you I didn't deserve to stay here. Joshua felt a knot tighten in his throat. He held his son's face in his hands, looking directly into his eyes. Andrew, listen closely to what I'm going to say. None of this, absolutely none of this, is your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. She manipulated you. Do you understand that? She used fear to force you to do things you didn't want to do. And that's her responsibility, not yours. The boy began crying again, but this time he seemed relieved. I didn't know what to do, Dad. I tried to hide it from you, but I felt so bad every time. I just wanted her to stop. Joshua hugged his son tightly, feeling the weight in his heart. I know, son. I know, and now it's going to stop, I promise. She'll never hurt you or force you to do anything again. Still hugging his son, Joshua let the anger take shape in his thoughts. He knew he would need to act quickly, but carefully. All that mattered now was protecting Andrew and ensuring Rebecca would never have the chance to harm their family again. While consoling the boy, Joshua began to plan his next steps. Joshua held Andrew's shoulders firmly, trying to convey the security the boy so desperately needed at that moment. Now you need to sleep, son, he said softly. Tomorrow we'll go to the police station together. We'll tell them everything that happened and make sure Rebecca pays for what she's done. I won't let her get away with this. Andrew nodded, his eyes still watery. But for the first time in weeks, he seemed a bit relieved. Thank you, Dad, he murmured, lying down and pulling up the covers. Joshua kissed his forehead and whispered, Sleep well. I'm here, and nothing will hurt you anymore. Andrew closed his eyes, and within minutes, he was asleep. Joshua, however, spent the night awake. He lay down, but his mind couldn't stop thinking about Andrew's words, the fear his son carried, and Rebecca's cold manipulation. He felt a growing anger mixed with guilt for not noticing what was happening earlier. How didn't I see the signs, he thought, as he stared at the dark ceiling. When dawn finally came, he got up before the alarm even went off. He went to Andrew's room and opened the door carefully. The boy was still asleep, breathing softly. Joshua approached and gently touched his shoulder. Andrew, it's time to get up. We need to go to the police station, he said firmly but kindly. Andrew opened his eyes slowly and nodded. I'm coming, Dad. He got up, grabbed clean clothes and quickly got dressed, still visibly nervous but determined. Joshua placed a hand on his son's shoulder as they left the house. You're being very brave, son. We'll handle this together. At the police station, they were met by an officer named Morales, who seemed experienced and friendly. Good morning. How can I help you? Morales asked, looking at Joshua and then at Andrew. Joshua took a deep breath and replied, We're here to file a report. My son has been intimidated and blackmailed by a woman who was in our house. He has important things to share. The officer motioned to 2 chairs and began taking notes. Start from the beginning, please. Who is this woman and what exactly happened? Joshua looked at Andrew, encouraging him with a nod. Son, tell the officer what you told me yesterday. It's important he knows everything. Andrew hesitated but began to speak, his voice still shaky. Her name is Rebecca. She's my dad's girlfriend, or she was. She made me take things from our house, things that were worth money. She said if I didn't, she'd leave, and my dad would be alone. She threatened me. The officer leaned forward, listening attentively. Threatened you how, exactly? Morales asked. Andrew swallowed hard. She said if I told my dad, he'd never trust me again, that he'd think I was a bad son. And she also said she could send me away. I didn't know what to do. The officer paused, letting the boy breathe. Do you know what she did with the things you took? Andrew shook his head. I don't know. She just said she needed them and that I had to give them to her. Joshua intervened, his voice full of anger. She manipulated me too, made me trust her while using my son to steal from my own house. I want this to be investigated immediately. Morales nodded and took more notes. We'll need a list of the missing items and any other information you can give us about her. Address, contacts, how she entered your life. They spent nearly 2 hours at the station, answering all the questions and detailing everything they knew. Officer Morales noted every word, ensuring the case would be taken seriously. We'll start a formal investigation. If what you're saying is confirmed, she'll face the necessary legal consequences, he said firmly. Joshua thanked him, holding Andrew's hand, and the two left the station relieved, but still carrying the emotional weight of the situation. On the way home, Joshua assured his son, "We did the right thing, son. Now we just have to wait. They'll take care of it." Andrew simply nodded, still visibly shaken. That same afternoon, while Joshua and Andrew were at home, Rebecca showed up unannounced, unaware of what had happened. The door opened and she entered with a fake smile, carrying her purse. Andrew was sitting on the floor playing on his phone, while Joshua remained on the couch, clearly deep in thought. Seeing her enter, Joshua felt his blood boil. He immediately stood up and walked toward Rebecca, his face filled with anger. "You have the audacity to show up here after everything you've done?" he shouted, his voice echoing through the room. Rebecca, still trying to appear calm, took a step back. "What are you talking about, Joshua? What are you accusing me of now?" He didn't back down, stepping closer. "What am I talking about? I'm talking about all the things you stole from my house using my son, about how you threatened and manipulated him. We went to the police, Rebecca. They know everything." Joshua was breathing heavily, trying to contain his fury, but it kept growing inside him. Rebecca's expression changed. The fake smile disappeared, replaced by an angry look. She turned to Andrew, who was still on the floor, huddled up. "You little ingrate," she screamed, pointing a finger. "You told him, didn't you? You're going to pay for this, Andrew." The boy started trembling, but before Rebecca could take another step, Joshua grabbed her arms tightly, forcing her to look directly at him. "Shut up!" Joshua shouted, his voice filled with rage. He pulled her closer, their faces almost touching, and his eyes seemed to spark with fury. "If you dare touch my son or go near him again, I swear I won't be responsible for my actions. Do you understand? Don't you ever cross Andrew's path again, or you'll pay dearly." For the first time, Rebecca seemed genuinely scared. She tried to pull away, but Joshua's grip and intense gaze left her paralyzed. He continued, "Now get out of my house, get out of my life, and be ready because the police are handling the rest. You'll get what you deserve." Joshua let go of Rebecca, who stumbled back, her face pale. Still furious but realizing she'd lost, she left, slamming the door behind her. Joshua returned to the couch, breathing heavily, while Andrew looked at him with wide eyes. "Dad, you were so mad," the boy murmured, still shaking. Joshua sat next to him and put an arm around his shoulders. "I'd do anything to protect you, son, no matter what. She'll never hurt you again." In the following days, the investigation progressed quickly. The police found several of the missing items at Rebecca's house, confirming the accusations made by Joshua and Andrew. The boys' testimony was crucial in strengthening the case, and authorities discovered Rebecca had a criminal record involving manipulation and theft. Within a week, she was arrested and formally charged with extortion, threats, and receiving stolen goods. Joshua and Andrew watched the case unfold from afar, relieved to see justice being served. The house, which had once felt heavy with tension and fear, began to transform into a lighter, safer place. Joshua made sure to reinforce to Andrew that he should never carry guilt for something that wasn't his responsibility. "You were very brave, son. I'm proud of you, and I promise I'll always be by your side no matter what." With time, the emotional wounds began to heal. Joshua and Andrew returned to their routines, making the most of their time together. Slowly, Andrew regained his confidence and joy, and Joshua, more attentive than ever, strengthened the bond between them. The experience was tough, but it also showed the strength of the love and protection between father and son. They had weathered the storm together, and nothing seemed stronger than the relationship they shared. In the end, what mattered was that they were safe, and that together they could face any challenge the future held. After all, Joshua had learned that as long as he stood by Andrew's side, nothing could break the unshakable bond between them. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, give it a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. See you in the next story.